Compañeros, welcome to the SQL Data Partners podcast, the podcast dedicated to SQL Server-related topics, which is designed to help you become familiar with what's out there, how you might use those features, or ideas on how you might apply them in your environments. I am Carlos L. Chacon.
And I am Steve Stedman. We are two data professionals trying to help others get a better handle on their database environments, either through this podcast, our training, or our consulting practice. Thanks for joining us on the SQL Trail. Welcome to the show.
SQL Data Partners.
Hey, compañeros, and welcome to episode 89. When we started the podcast, one of the things we like to do is to talk about different topics. And as we've been able to meet more and more of you, one of the subjects that's kind of come up is that more and more people that are listening are working by themselves, meaning that they're the only DBA in their organization. So today we thought we'd talk a little bit about what that means and some of the challenges that DBAs can face when they're the only one.
Yep. And the term we're using for that is the Lone DBA, when they're the only one in their company that is really doing that DBA role.
And so they have lots of things kind of thrown at them. And so one of the people that's been talking a bit about this is Monica Rathbun. And so we're excited to have her on the show today. The timing is a little weird the way that we're recording this, but this last weekend, when we record, we just finished up our SQL Saturday here in Richmond and had another good event. One of the things that I thought was interesting is Slava, who we haven't had on the show, but he's out of Baltimore, and many of you may know Slava, was coming down for the speakers event, and he tweeted, and he said, "This is the first SQL Saturday where I will know all of the speakers." And I thought that it was interesting that, again, the SQL family community, even though he's in Baltimore, this is in Richmond, that ability to be able to know, connect, share with others, and build relationships with them so that you want to come to an event and have fun with people. That's really neat. And it was nice to have Slava and the other speakers down and catching up with some folks that I don't get to see as often maybe as I would like.
Yep, it really shows how strong the SQL community or the SQL family is when somebody can show up for an event like that and know all the speakers.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's going to play a little bit into our conversation here with the Lone DBA.
Yep.
Before we do that, let's do a little SQL Server in the news.
And what is that one, Carlos?
Interestingly enough, and I know on this podcast, we've kind of, maybe beat up the replication a little bit, but Microsoft came out with a document, if you will, and they talk about getting near real-time replication from SQL Server to the cloud. And so this idea is I have an on-premise database and I want to get that information to the cloud. How can I do that as quickly as possible? And that basically they're using a tried and true technology in transactional replication.
So transactional replication to go from your local on-premise to a cloud-based database.
That's right.
Not just a VM hosted in Azure, but an actual Azure SQL database?
Yeah, so they give us the option to do either one on the VM or on Azure SQL Database. Providing a URL, you can use that replication. And the reason I wanted to bring this up in this segment, a lot of times with all of the new features, the high availability features that are in the new versions of SQL Server, we kind of tend to forget what is tried and true there. What's interesting to me is that they're using this as an example to say, hey guys, look what I can do, and remind us a little bit that this is not going away. And who knows, maybe this means that it might get a little bit more love in the future from a tooling perspective.
Yep. And that's really interesting because I think, a lot of people who've used replication, they gripe about it a bit and they hope that it'll go away one day and there'll be something different there to do something similar. But it sounds like that's not the case anytime in the near future. And I think that, it's a pretty sound platform. It's just people have to know how to behave around replication to not do something to break it.
Yeah, that's true. I think that probably, again, because it's one of those things that just always has been around and the tooling hasn't changed too much, it doesn't get a whole lot of love. And the tooling hasn't changed too much, it doesn't get a whole lot of love. But as you get in there, and admittedly, I haven't been in too many environments where I've had to administer a transactional replication because there are the different options as well. But you do need to kind of get your hands dirty and really understand all of those features. But if you do, it is there, it's been around, and hopefully won't cause you too much problems.
Yep. Yes, indeed. All right. So this week's episode is on the Lone DBA. And as we mentioned earlier, the guest is Monica Rathbun. And Monica is currently a senior database administrator / BI architect at Massimo Zanetti Beverage. Hopefully I've pronounced that correctly, in Virginia. She's also been a Lone DBA for 15 years, working with all aspects of SQL Server and Oracle. She's the co-leader of the Hampton Road SQL Server Users Group and can be found on Twitter daily. Stick around because you'll know why that piece is class. She's not busy with work. You'll find her playing taxi for her 2 daughters, back and forth to dance classes.
Yeah, so I thought that it was be interesting to have Monica on here, kind of get her perspective, obviously, as being the Lone DBA for such a long time. Some of the challenges that people face, of course, if your challenges might be different, we'd be very interested in getting some of your feedback. You can let us know on the show notes page for today's episode. That will be at SQLDataPartners.com/Lone DBA.
Or at SQLDataPartners.com/89. As we've added recently the number. So if you just remember the episode number, you can get to the show notes quicker and not remember what our other short URL is.
Yep. So let's go ahead and jump into the conversation with Monica. So Monica, welcome to the program.
Hey guys, how are you?
We are doing great, and we appreciate you coming on the program today. I've had the chance to get to know you as being close to Richmond here in the Norfolk area. I've been down to your user group a few times, and so it's great that you can come on and be on the show with us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Ultimately, our topic today is that of the Lone DBA, or I'm the only database administrator in my organization. How do I get through that? Or what are some tactics, techniques? One of the things we like to do on this program is to share how other folks are doing things. So that's kind of our topic today in regards to being the only DBA. So why don't you give us your background as you are the Lone DBA in your organization and talk to us about your environment a little bit.
Awesome. Thanks. Well, I'm Monica Rathbun. I'm a senior database administrator and a BI architect currently for Massimo Zanetti Beverage in Suffolk, Virginia. I'm a past Mid-Atlantic regional mentor and a chapter leader for our user group, really into the community and giving 12 years as the Lone DBA at the Port of Virginia. All by myself, I ran all the SQL servers, 56 instances on 40 servers and 2 Oracle servers by myself. So all the cargo coming in and out of the port, the data went through my hands. I don't know what they were thinking when they did that, but they did, and we made it work. Currently, right now at Massimo Zanetti, I have 16 instances. That's 15 SQL servers, and I'm still stuck with 1 Oracle server. I can't get rid of it, but I try. So in my knowledge base, I do everything but the kitchen, the kitchen sink. I do SSRS, SSIS. I do actual DBA work. I develop. Again, I get stuck with the Oracle side. I do disaster recovery. You name it. Whatever has to do with SQL Server, it falls into my hands.
Sure. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned you actually introduce yourself as having that dual role. You said database administrator and BI. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned you actually introduce yourself as having that dual role. You said database administrator and BI architect. And I think that for a lot of, listeners, compañeros out there that are in that role, they're going to have more than just a database responsibility in their organization.
Absolutely. Not only is it the development side, but again, you've got your Power BI, all the business intelligence and analytics that go along with the data. That still falls into my lap, even though I'm an operational DBA, so to speak.
Sure.
When I hear the term Lone DBA, sometimes I almost think of it like the Lone Ranger from the TV show years and years ago, as this lone person out in the Wild West, and everything they're coming across is like a new adventure. Does it feel that way to you on some days?
Oh, that's exactly what it feels like. So I have to be self-taught, right? To be a Lone DBA, you've got to have like 48 arms attached to you doing 20 things at a time. You have that problem and you have to do it quick.
Mm.
So it's exactly like that. I come out with guns blazing and, try to figure out what the newest problem is and what the newest developing thing that they want me to do, how to make it happen. Right. So
Right.
it's 20 million things coming at you at one time, taking out the whole wild, wild west yourself. So,
And I think because of the revolving responsibility, I guess I'll say, that it can then be tricky to keep up with all of the components, right? You mentioned Power BI is something that they're adding. Well, SQL Server is not reducing in features, right? They're not making that, I won't use the word simpler, but it's becoming more complex, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it can be difficult to know all of those different touch points. And so we kind of talk about or use that phrase, right? Jack of all trades and master of none.
Master of none, exactly. So I talk about this all the time. I learn about everything, but I'm an expert in nothing.
All trades and master of none.
Master of none, exactly. So I talk about this all the time. I learn about everything, but I'm an expert in nothing. So being a master of anything is impossible when you've got 20 million things coming at you. You've got to learn what you need, when you need it, and move on to the next thing. So
Sure.
to keep up with the latest and greatest, the only thing I can do is say you've really got to be a self-motivated, passionate about SQL Server to where you're reaching out and learning things on your own, right? You're self-teaching. You're going to those virtual conferences, SQL Saturdays, past summits. You're reading blogs. You're constantly having new things come at you, and you've got to keep up. You've got to learn it to get it done. And
Sure.
so, you definitely have to be somebody that can go out there and learn bits and pieces enough to get the job done. I know so many people that need to go and read every book about, as a Lone DBA, you've got to find out what you need and just start tearing at it and, cross your fingers.
So it really seems like, based off of that, for the hiring manager out there that's trying to hire their Lone DBA, one of the skills that's probably the biggest thing they need is really the ability to learn. Maybe not so much a
Absolutely.
specific skill on anything in SQL Server, but the ability to go and learn that, to go to those SQL Saturdays, to go to those virtual trains, to be able to pick up and learn and go from there.
Exactly. You've got to be, I'm a very much a type A kind of person. And I think you have to be a type A organized go-getter to hold down a Lone DBA type job, because there is so much to keep organized and so much to learn and so much to figure out on your own that you just don't have time for somebody to show you or teach you, or, you just kind of have to go do it. So they definitely have to be looking for somebody that fits that mold.
We won't be able to know everything to the nth degree. So you're starting to see more and more of this idea of specialization. Even in the SQL community, we have specializations, right? Those who are doing, data storage or high availability, as you mentioned, performance tuning, these types of things. You're starting to see that more. And I think that as organizations have broad data needs, and they're going to have to start reaching out. And I think that the future roles of the database administrator may focus more in consulting groups than in traditional organizations. That's not to say that those jobs are going to go away per se. I guess looking at some numbers from this is from U.S. News and World Report, and this is talking specifically about the United States job spectrum. But they're reporting this was in 2016, and they're reporting an 11% employment growth for database administrators, specifically about the United States job spectrum. But they're reporting this was in 2016, and they're reporting an 11% employment growth for database administrators by 2024. Right now, they were projecting much higher numbers earlier in 2014, so that's been tempered a little bit. But there's still quite a bit of growth. They say there's over 13,000 database administrators in the country, right?
Sounds like
and I think that, what's that?
Sounds like we're in the right field.
That's right. Right. So, 11% growth. So I guess, 10% growth, that's another, 1,300 jobs that are going to be created there in the next 10 years. And I kind of see some of those jobs being in, again, these kind of specializations. So consulting shops, because of the focus that people are going to have, and that those who remain kind of the Lone DBA in their organizations are going to have to do more of that directing and kind of understanding concepts. Okay, here's the objective of what I wanted to do. Here's the technology path that I think I want to pursue. And then let's put the plan in to have that done.
So this is how I work it. So again, jack of all trades, right? I'm not a guru in anything, but I know who to call, when to call, and where to reach out for help. One of the things about being a Lone DBA is that you got to learn how to get what I call virtual coworkers. And that is finding your network and your avenues to those experts to where you can actually get your job done with the experts, a lot of times for free or with their help or guidance, and not having to go out to the consultants and use them and pay for their services and stuff like that. Now, to me, having a consultant is a good thing because it kind of frees up some of my time. I'm not afraid of using consultants. I actually advocate bringing consultants in every once in a while so I can do the things that I enjoy, and I kind of give them the work that I might not really want to work on or that I've had experience in before. And yeah, I've done that. Let's let them do something while I handle this other stuff. So I believe, they do have a role. They will have their specializations that might give them a foot up in the market. But as a Lone DBA, using social media like Twitter and Slack and things like that, you can actually get access to these experts, by going to SQL Saturdays and conferences and networking with these go-to experts, in PowerShell, in storage, having David Klee, the VMware storage expert, having him available to you to ask questions. That's what getting those virtual coworkers is all about, right? Doing the networking, the avenues, getting the help. I don't think there's going to be a time where the Lone DBA doesn't exist anymore or that it's not going to be needed. But I think the Lone DBA knowing how to get to the experts and get to those specialized people is going to be something that is a skill that every single one of them is going to have.
And I think that shows how important the concept of SQL family is, and knowing who's out there that you can talk to and who's out there that has that specialty that you want to pick up. I kind of think about it like a plumber. I mean, if I have a plumbing problem I need done in my house, I could go and attempt to do it myself, or I could go hire a plumber. But if I could, instead of hiring a plumber, just go ask someone, how would you go about doing this, and do it myself, I might be able to get it done a lot quicker and a lot cheaper than if I just tried it on my own. And I think that's how the same kind of thing comes into play with SQL family and looking at database things or specializations there.
Yeah, people joke me all the time because I have Twitter in my office 24/7 and it's on my phone and everything. People come in my office like, why are you on Twitter? It's like being on Facebook or something. It's like, no, these are my virtual coworkers, right? These are the people that help me get my job done every day. We're throwing ideas back and forth. We're helping each other out. We're blogging and sharing our knowledge. These people help me get my job done every day. Being a Lone DBA isn't truly a lone isolated DBA anymore like it was when I first started 15 years ago. I truly have coworkers. They're just not on the payroll. They're the experts out there that are when it's, 11 o'clock at night and I've got a disaster on my hands or something that I've never seen before and I've run into a brick wall, I can shoot some questions out to them. And SQL Family is out there to give me the guidance and point me in a direction so I can get these problems solved. And It's awesome. I preach about Twitter all the time. People joke me.
Twitter right there is the way to do it, to be better in your job. And I think that a lot of people equate social media, it's just sort of goofing around or whatever it may be. But the value of Twitter, being able to get to those people quickly, is just incredible.
So don't get me wrong. I'm the queen of sending stupid puns out there on Twitter to make people laugh or something. But I actually go and say, people gather around the water cooler in the morning and you talk about your weekend and you do jokes or you walk by somebody's office and you'll make a comment or laugh about. I do that virtually, right? I'll sit out there and I'm building these relationships every day with these other DBAs and developers and stuff that are out there. So yeah, I'll throw a stupid joke out there. I might not use it exactly for work that day, but it's constantly building that network and using that media to help you for the future, right?
And what amazes me with that is when somebody has a problem and they post that they need help, how quickly experts in the area will respond. And it's experts in the area will respond. And it's almost like it's a competition when somebody throws out a question that they're in trouble. How many people can jump in and try and solve it for you? And it's really, really pretty cool.
Yeah.
I actually had somebody do a SharePoint upgrade. And I talk about this one whenever I give my sessions because it really resonates with me how great the community is. We did a SharePoint upgrade where first I didn't know they were doing an upgrade. Second, when they did the upgrade, they didn't do a full backup. They just decided to do a snapshot.
Yikes.
And then what happened was at 11 o'clock at night, my SharePoint admin came and said, hey, the upgrade failed. We tried to roll back with the snapshot and it won't work. We actually use SSRS integrated mode inside SharePoint. So all of our reports and data sources and everything are sitting in SharePoint. Well, what happened was when they rolled back, they lost everything. All reports, everything that we do, they need those reports to know what recipes to use, what amounts they need to be doing, what their productivity and stuff is going to be. And it's 11 o'clock at night and the shift is going to change 6 o'clock in the morning. And I have to have all of that stuff back up and running. So what did I do? I don't know SharePoint any better than anybody else, right? But I know a little bit about the databases. I turned to Twitter and I said, hey guys, I've got a problem. This is missing. This is my error. And within 5 minutes, I had some of the biggest names in the community come back and say, hey, have you looked at this? Did you do this? And as I'm moving along, we're going through the checkpoints of what to do to solve the problem. By 8 a.m. in the morning, by 7. So I was a little bit late. I had every single report put back into the system and the whole catalog rebuilt. But I was able to do that because of the people helping me on Twitter. I can't thank them enough. But yeah, exactly. It's like a competition. They all just jump in right away and helping me for hours. Great.
So it almost seems like you could classify Lone DBAs into two categories. There's the Lone DBAs that are truly alone and don't have that network. And that might be a very lonely role. And then there's the Lone DBAs like yourself who have that network and know how to get the answers quickly. And it can be a very, social role in getting a lot of that solved.
Absolutely. So I started out 15 years ago at the port, straight out of college, knew nothing about SQL Server. And they decided, hey, Monica's going to be the DBA. I had been hired as a MIS coordinator, so I was just writing some layout for some code. And they said, okay, we're going to have you as the DBA. Well, I knew nothing. They sent me to school for 6 weeks. I went and got my certification. And there you go. There's the port in my hand. They were crazy. The port in my hand. I'm running it all, right? So I was for a long time that lone DBA, not knowing anything, self-teaching myself, not holding their, I know many of people that were in the same situation that are just sitting in that office, not knowing where to reach out to and holding their breath that when they push that button or run that code, they're not going to break anything else,
Right. Because we've all been there, right? Yeah. We all started there, right? And so we all know that feeling. But I think it's interesting, and kind of what Steve mentioned, those two camps, it comes at a cost. And I'll use that word cost because, Monica, you've mentioned getting involved and getting to know those people. And I'm not trying to downgrade Twitter at all, but the reality is that people are more, while they'll kind of give you the 140 characters once, maybe twice, it's when they know you and have had a relationship with you that they're willing to give you, a couple hundred characters, right?
Absolutely. So it's important to go to events like SQL Saturdays and go into your local user group and making those connections in person.
Characters, right?
Absolutely. So it's important to go to events like SQL Saturdays and go into your local user group and making those connections in person. Because when I'm sitting around, because now I speak at SQL Saturdays, when you're sitting around
and I think that was my point, is that it's not so much just even going, right? There's a slight extension in that you've dipped your toe into the speaker pool, which is another level of commitment.
Correct. Because those speakers are the experts. A lot of them are the experts in their fields, or they know, a little piece of it better than you will. And you're sitting around the speaker room, or you're sitting around at the speaker dinners or something, and you're talking shop, and you're like, oh, I ran into that problem. And they're like, oh, I got the script for you. Or, oh, let's talk about this, next week. Let's get together. Because you're actually sitting around and making these relationships and being involved. And people, it's name recognition, right? Name and face. The more that they know you, the more exposure you have, the more likely you're going to get that expertise, knowledge available to you when you need it.
And being a speaker at a SQL Saturday event and being at that speaker dinner or in the speaker ready room with the other speakers, I mean, that's priceless, I think. I mean, the value you can get from that.
Yeah, huge.
I guess maybe the point there is that it's much more difficult, right, to form those relationships if you're not willing to get out. And now I can, hear all the introverts saying, well, that's just not me. I can't go do that. I mean, you're going to have to pay the piper in some form. I'm not saying you have to go out and speak at every single SQL Saturday or anything, but how can you form those relationships? How can you get out there? And maybe through forums is another way, right, to do some of that. But reaching out, trying to connect with others I think is an important component.
It's tough. So my session is actually, I'm It, Survival Tips for the Lone DBA. And in that one, I've probably given it what some of them are the introverts and, kind of just work on their own and don't realize what's out there available to them. And so I kind of do my best to mentor them because a lot of them that come in are Lone DBAs or with smaller shops and say, hey, go out on Twitter, hit me up. I have a gurus list that I have on my Twitter account that I tell them, hey, start following them. Go in the morning and say, hey, Monica, I was in your session. Good morning. And then I go out and I say, and everybody jokes at me this too, but I do it anyways. I say, hey, such and such, welcome to the SQL family. Everybody say hi, or something. And I get people from the community. I'm DMing people and say, hey, say hi to such and such and such and such, and making sure they're welcome. Make them feel like they can be part of this community. And then within the next week or so, I always hit those people back up and say, how's it going? Do you have any questions or whatever? So I think it's important for the leaders out in the community to mentor and pull people in and let them know, the resources that are out there. I think it back up and say, how's it going? Do you have any questions or whatever? So I think it's important for the leaders out in the community to mentor and pull people in and let them know, the resources that are out there and pull those introverts into our network.
How many people take you up on that?
Oh my God, I laugh every time. It's so awesome. So I have a group of friends that I'm really close with, SQL people, and I'll say, another one did it. Woohoo, they're doing their homework. So I'd say after I get about 15 to 25 in my session consistently, and I would say I get probably a dozen.
Oh, wow.
That come back and say, hey, Monica, I'm doing my homework. Nice to meet you.
So that's, 75%, Great,
so
better.
If you see what I've spawned out and spiderwebbed in the last year and a half, I'd really like to see what that number is. But yeah, I think it's important for us out there, the leaders, to start pulling the people in. That's how we continue to get our community growing, right? And help other people that are the Lone DBAs, mentor them and pull them out there.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'll go ahead and bring up the topic. Steve and I have toyed with this idea or asked ourselves, that group, the Lone DBAs, those who have responsibilities beyond just the database, right? And obviously there's lots of trainings out there, but are they getting the right mix of connections and training, I'll say, right? And I think about, so even something like SQL Cruise. So the summit's great. It's expensive. Again, it's great. I'm not knocking it in any stretch of the imagination. It's very large. I think it's very easy to get a contact or two, but do you come away with more than a handful of people you can reach out to? I don't know. For some people may. I think some people do good at it. Do most people? I don't know. We toyed with that idea of, okay, do we have something that's kind of suited, tailored to that Lone DBA where they can not only increase their learning, be familiar with 25, 30, 40 people that they can then network afterwards?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the key skills for a Lone DBA aren't exactly the ones that they're going to learn in class.
Sure.
I think they're mostly personality and, like I said, the go-getter types are the ones that are gonna take on these type of roles and be successful at it. I think those that are trying to learn those skills, or you guys trying to come up with some kind of training that would gear to those skills, is going to be a lot of not just technical pieces, but organizational skills and managing expectation type skills and how to use your outside resources, more of a how to manage the workload type training than specific skill sets. Does that make sense?
No, I think it does.
No, it doesn't make sense. or just?
Oh, I think yes, it does.
Yeah. Because I mean, some of the responsibilities that you have, like you mentioned, are so managing the expectations of your managers or of your team, right? What can I realistically get through this week, right? When I have, these multiple projects. I mean, we all kind of deal with some of this, to some extent, but it goes beyond just the technical capabilities.
I think on that topic, that sort of leads into the concept of managing projects. And I think being the lone DBA, oftentimes what I've seen is you take a look at a project and you figure out what it's going to take to do it. And then other things crop up along the way that were unexpected. Right. Server needs some kind of maintenance that you had no idea was going to happen this week. And those kind of things can cause projects to maybe shift a little bit or be delayed. How do you go about setting those expectations or managing projects when you're the only person that's going to be able to get the work done there?
So that's one of the things I also hit on. It's one of my biggest things is I do, no lie, 70 to 80 things in a week, right? Those are including projects. Those might be tweaks that have to happen to the server. That might have to be rewriting part of a cube. It could be a new report that has to be done. It could be store procedures that have to be done. It could be an upgrade. It could be all of this stuff. How do you deal with it? And I talk about the importance of using your boss as a shield, right? You have to have a really great relationship with your boss to where you're not the angry DBA. You're not the one that's always saying no to people. You're not necessarily a yes man. You're actually able to manage the workload by saying, hey, this is everything I've got going on. This drive-by, I call it, just happened. Somebody just walked in and they need this thing ASAP. I don't have room in my schedule. I really don't think this is a priority. I turn it to my boss. Room in my schedule. I really don't think this is a priority. I turn it to my boss, right? I make sure my boss is handling the workload that I think is not necessarily my highest priority. Or I can go to them and say, hey, I've got this 5 things I'm working on. These are what I think are critical at the moment. I need you to tell me, yes, I can put this one down to the bottom of the barrel or something like that. Having my boss be my shield and take the blunt of the hits from everybody else coming at you and needing things done is critical. You have to be really organized, right? So I keep a running list on just a piece of paper every day that I go and mark down. These are the things I plan on getting done. And then I jot on during the day, these are the things that crept in. These are the things that are coming up next. And you just kind of keep rolling through it because there's so many things coming your way. You just got to keep checking them off. That's all you can do. And that leads me to also with the company expectations, get tools, right? I go in action, right? Some people have to bake their own monitoring tools. Some people just have to watch the logs. There's different things that have to be done. I don't have time to do that because you're working on other projects. So you've got to go to your company and say, I can be more efficient and get more work done for you if you get me these tools, right? So that's one of the things is making sure if the company has a million things for you to do and you're that army of one, that they get you the tools to make you as efficient as possible.
I'll never forget being in a presentation with Adam Mechanic, right? So Adam Mechanic, that name, SP_who is active, right? Not a slouch, he's probably forgotten more about SQL Server than I know, right? And he was in a presentation and he said, oh yeah, well, I always use monitoring or, I'm abbreviating it right at that point, but I thought, no, we were at a vendor event, and I thought he must just be saying that because we're at this event, and then I follow up with him. And he's like, no. He's like, I always, and yes, I have who is active, but that's kind of troubleshooting a specific here are the scenarios under which I use that. And when he was on the episode 22, we talked a little bit about that. But he's like, I always use a monitoring tool because just to provide some of those basics, history, breadth, what's the baselines, those kinds of things. And I think, they've become, there's free ones. Obviously we have our homegrown one. The other paid products, they're at a price point where, at least on production, people should be willing to pony that up to, if that's something that they care a lot about. Right.
Time is of the essence when you have so much work that needs to be done and you only have one person doing it. So it's worth the weight in gold for them to go and spend, several $1,000s on a tool and not have to hire another person, and you're still getting the workload done.
Yeah, if you look at the cost of that tool compared to the cost of a DBA for a year or 2 years or whatever it may be, the tools are really cheap by comparison.
Done.
Yeah, if you look
critical.
at the cost of that tool compared to the cost of a DBA for a year or 2 years or whatever it may be,
No
the
kidding.
tools are really cheap by comparison.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
It's critical. I'm going to save so much time pinpointing what my issue is or what's causing, my memory to be flushed or, anything. It's going to take high CPU, anything that's running long, things like that. It's going to be so much faster for me to pinpoint that problem and get it solved than to not have the tool.
Right.
And therefore, I'm taking longer to do it. And there's more work that's not getting done because I'm having to.
Right. And, it doesn't have to be the super expensive, tool, right? But again, like you mentioned, just something to help you keep up to date with what's going on and help direct the conversation. Even if that conversation is, hey, I'm kind of at the end of my rope here. I think we need to reach out and, get some help or, whatever.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there's been a single DBA can manage. And I think a lot of that really relates to how many tools you have in place versus how much manual work you have to do. But the other thing that I think was completely left out of that discussion was how many other things are coming along, how many warehousing type things are coming up, or how many cubes are you having to work on, or how many other things are jumping in there. Because I think if it's solely just managing a number of instances and that's all you do, it's very different than managing an entire eco-structure there.
100%.
Right.
Yep. And as Lone DBA, you've got it all.
Yep.
Sure.
You're doing it all. So
And
one of the other
even-
things,
Even when I was not the lone DBA, right? Kind of to that point is that I think one of the other roles that we get roped into most frequently, at least it was my experience, is the ETL, or potentially even some analytics, right? So it's like now the data lives in the database. Well, it's now a database problem, quote unquote. Your human resources, your employee, database now needs to integrate with something. Oh, well, you need to write a process to make that happen, right?
I do that too. Yep, that's all included. If it touches anything, there's data there, it's going to fall in that lap, It's all included. But one of the things I wanted to also talk about is life balance struggles, because you were talking about, how do you manage company expectations? Well, when you're a lone DBA, you're also on call 24/7. It's just you. We have no downtime windows. We're a 24/7 shop. How do I manage to breathe? And how do I manage to take vacation? I joke all the time. I have 2 girls who dance, like seriously dance. And lucky for me, I work for a company that's flexible enough that I'm not actually in the building, 40 hours a week. I'm able to get off at 3:30 every day to take them to dance because I'm on call 24/7. Sometimes the company wins hours, sometimes I win. Sometimes the company wins hours, sometimes I win hours. But I'm able to actually do my job from the dance studio parking lot. I actually get Jimmy John's to deliver me dinner at the dance studio parking lot while I'm working in my car. And on vacation, I'm always taking my laptop with me on vacation. I actually went into labor with one of my girls, and while I was having contractions, I was working, trying to get something done before I went out. So, life balance struggle is no joke when it comes to being a lone DBA. The key to that is making your time work for you, making sure your boss is aware of the hours that you're working without being the whiny DBA saying, oh, I worked last night, or, oh, I worked this weekend, or whatever. You have to have the skill of finesse to let your boss know, by copying them in an email 2:30 in the morning, or updating a ticket at a certain time, or, when you're doing it, the subtle hints that, hey, she's doing work in the background. So that way you can ask for flex time, right? I'm able to not work in the building. I'm able to take my laptop with me on vacations and still get my vacations in, and, still able to actually live a little bit of my life. And not be stuck in that building. I can work remotely when I want to work remotely, because I might need to get away from those drive-by scenarios of people coming in my office and interrupting the work that needs to be done. I might need to get space. So it's really important to have that relationship, again, going back to your boss, making sure that you can keep your sanity. Keeping your sanity is a big thing, and having your family still get their time. So you've got to be able to finesse it and show them that you're doing the hours and not burn yourself out.
Yep. And I think so much of what we've been through here today in the conversation really comes back to being able to work with a good boss, someone who trusts you, someone who knows that when you're on Twitter, you're you're working, and someone who knows that when you're working remotely, you're working, and not someone who just simply values you being in a chair in an office.
Right. They realize what it takes to get this kind of work done. They've got to actually give you the space to do it and the autonomy to get it done. So it's really, really, really important to have those conversations and that relationship with your boss.
Yeah. Okay, great. Shall we go into the SQL family questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sure.
All right. So, Monica, how did you first get started with SQL Server? I know you touched on that a little bit earlier, but can you run through that for us?
I was thrown to the wolves. No. No, they just happen to have a position opening at the port. I'm actually in a sorority, Chi Omega, and my sorority sister, who was actually working for HR at the port, found out I was graduating. And my sorority sister, who was actually working for HR at the port, found out I was graduating. And she said, "Hey, we've got a job coming up. Why don't you come work for us?" And I was like, okay. Well, I started in there. I was a MIS coordinator for like 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. And then this DBA job came in. And they said, "You'd be a perfect fit." And I'm like, well, I know nothing about databases. I have an IT degree, but you only take 1 or 2 classes on it. Exactly. And they said, "Here you go. Let's go for it. Let's get you trained." And I just fell in love with SQL Server. It's like in my blood. I just totally got it and understood it. And I just wanted more. I had that hunger for it. So that's how I got started, with just that little bit of a push. Hey, you're going to learn it. And then I jetted off from there and tried to learn everything I could possibly learn about it. Kind of didn't have a choice because I got, 56 servers running the entire port thrown at me. Yeah, that's how I got started. I just had this opportunity come through due to networking, a different kind of networking, this one through the sorority, and fell in love with it.
Yeah. Now, if you could change one thing about SQL Server, what would it be?
Change one thing. Oh, you guys asked some hard questions. Go back to being a Lone DBA. I can answer those. I don't know. I would really like to put some voice recognition into it. Tell it to do something for me. Can we talk about that? No.
There you go. Cortana.
Yeah, Cortana. Re-index this for me and have it do it for me. That would be great.
Just phone up your SQL Server and tell it what it needs to have happen.
Exactly. That would be awesome. Yeah.
All right. So what is the best piece of career advice that you've ever received?
Oh, network. That's the best bit. Some people will say you've got to learn the latest and greatest. Make sure you have your certifications. Make sure you're doing this. Make sure you're doing that. To me, it's all about the connections that you make. In your career, you're going to want to move on and move up. You're going to want to try to get into different things. And it would be fantastic if you had people coming to you rather than you having to go seek something. So I think making those network connections kind of gear you towards that for your future career as you get higher up, because they'll begin to know what you do and they're going to come after you. So I think not only networking to get your daily job done and learning from the experts and expanding your knowledge from that and helping each other out, I think it gears you towards your next step, which we're always constantly moving towards, right?
Yeah. Monica, our last question for you today. If you could have one superhero power, what would it be and why do you want it?
Oh, I thought we were going to skip this question, Carlos. Superhero. Let's go with seeing the future. I'd like to, up in a row and go after it and be one step ahead. It would be awesome if I knew what was coming and can prepare for it ahead of time.
Okay. That'd be interesting, right? So like how far in advance could you see? Is it just like, images or like, 15 minutes in advance?
Oh,
what?
Let's go with a month span. I think a month span would be more than enough to handle. Any more beyond that, you start to get into some critical, how do I prevent that from happening? Or,
that's true.
Detriment of this thing is coming at me. So let's go with the shorter 1 month time span. It gives me plenty of time to plan and get some action in there. Yes, we'll go with that.
It's interesting because we've asked this question so many times. It would be interesting to go and design this one superhero that's the all-encompassing DBA superhero that has all the powers that all the DBAs wanted.
That would be awesome.
I think it was Pinal who wanted to be able to just touch or look at the SQL Server and know, who wanted to be able to just touch or look at the SQL Server and know what was wrong with it or know what had been done to it. And combine that with your seeing the future, you'd be all-knowing on the whole SQL Server.
Well, and then again, I've already had SQL Server change, so it actually does it by voice command, right? So there we go. So now it's going to tell me what's wrong. Then we're going to tell it how to fix it. And then we're going to know ahead of time what's wrong with it, right?
And then throw in some time travel and some flight, and we'd be set.
Hey, I think Carla said something about flying earlier, so
yeah.
We got it covered.
All right, good stuff.
Yes. So, Monica, thanks again for coming on the program.
All right. Thanks, guys, for having me. This was fun.
You had an interesting takeaway from this conversation, Steve.
Yes, indeed. I think that the comment of being alone but not alone in regard to, although you are the lone DBA in your company, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to find your social media contacts, your Twitter contacts, the people you know that you know online. So when something comes up that you need to ask a question of somebody else, rather than asking the DBA across the room, you use Twitter and ask, or email or other tools, and ask someone that you know that's sort of a virtual style coworker that may not necessarily be in the same building or the same company, but someone you know and trust that you can rely on. And I think that is extremely important.
That's right. And that alone has been worth the time investment, if you will, in participating in some of these SQL Saturday events or in the user group meetings, is to be able to have that network. You know, it's interesting. In the CIO, we had a CIO panel in the SQL Saturday here in Richmond this last weekend. And one of the panelists was the CIO for the UNOS organization, which is the organization that manages the organ transplants. So they match donors to organs, if you will, and kind of do the IT components in the middle. And we were talking a little bit about what data people needed to do better. And one of the things that we've brought up in our episode with the CIOs is that the leadership is looking for the data people to know the business better. And so I said, well, we have conferences every year and we'll teach the technology, but we're never going to teach the business of organ transplants. And so he actually pointed that idea of using your network, and maybe organ transplants is that vertical as an example. There are others. It could be shipping, it could be health and human services, or government agencies, nonprofits, things like that. But basically leveraging your network to find out more about what's out there, what problems the business is having. That might give you a better sense of where your next position might be if you're not happy in the business that you're currently supporting.
Interesting. And I think that making a switch from one industry to another, if you've been in that industry or one industry for a while, can be challenging. And I think that network is something that can help you quite a bit, is knowing who to ask for help or knowing who to ask for advice when you're making that change.
Exactly. And again, almost like this podcast, it's just having enough information so that you avoid the pitfalls.
Yep.
Right. So that you're like, oh, well, in this industry, maybe there's keywords or certain, vernacular. In this industry, maybe there's keywords or certain, vernacular that's used, so that you can know that, so that as you talk with those people, that you're on the same page. And I think that can go a big way.
Yep. So on that topic of growing your network and how important it is, that brings us back to the Compañero conference.
That's right. So as we've talked about that idea of connecting with others, we kind of came up with this idea of let's kind of take the podcast and make it an in-person event.
Yes, and we have that scheduled for October.
Yes, that's right. That's big news. I'm not sure if we announced that last episode, but that has been scheduled for October 4th and 5th, and it's going to be in Norfolk, Virginia.
And Carlos will be there, I will be there, and a handful of other speakers will be there as well.
Yeah, that's right. We are looking to flesh out the speaker deck, and we're talking with folks now. It's a bit preliminary to announce names just yet, but they will be an opportunity to get together, interact with other people. Our focus is really this Lone DBA. We think that there are a lot of you out there that aren't taking advantage of the training options or the training budgets that you have available. One, because probably the other training is either too long or too expensive. And so we think that this will be a potential alternative to not using it at all and being able to come out, get to know some new people, and have some fun at the same time.
Yep. And I think that getting to know people, have fun, and learning along the way is a great combination. And we'll be doing all of that at the Compañero conference.
That's right. So to find out more information, and as we make additional plans, we'll continue to announce those things. But if you'd like to find more information, you can go to compañeroconference.com. For those of you that may not know compañero is kind of how it sounds in English, or how it's spelled, if you will, in English. And that will get you to the URL. I guess we should add that the first 10 tickets that we sell will be for $400. So we're going to start there. We want to get that base. We want to make sure that that is as economical as possible. And so we hope that you'll take a peek there. And if there's something you'd like to see, particularly sessions or specific areas that you think we should be focusing on, let us know that as well.
Yes, indeed. And we'll be, over the next several months, building out the rest of the schedule for that and announcing more details along the way. And it should be a great conference. I'm looking forward to it.
That's right. So our music for SQL Server in the News is by Mansardian, used under Creative Commons. I think that's going to do it for this episode. As always, if you have questions or comments, you can reach out to us on the podcast, used under Creative Commons. I think that's going to do it for this episode. As always, if you have questions or comments, you can reach out to us on the podcast page, SQLDataPartners.com/podcast, or on Twitter. I am at Carlos L. Chacon.
And I am at SQL EMT. And we'll see you on the SQL Trail.